The desert training base stretched endlessly under the blistering sun, its sand shimmering like molten gold. Soldiers moved in perfect unison, sweat running down their necks as the sound of boots striking the ground echoed across the field. At the center of it all stood Colonel Richard Harris, a man whose reputation for breaking soldiers was as fierce as the desert heat itself. His voice carried authority and cruelty in equal measure, and no one dared question his word. No one, until that morning. Lieutenant Emma Ross stood among the recruits, her uniform spotless, her expression unreadable. She had joined the elite tactical unit just 3 days ago, transferred from an overseas combat division. The men whispered about her, some curious, some dismissive. To them, she was a woman who didn't belong in a place designed for pain and obedience. But Emma didn't come to belong, she came to prove that discipline wasn't about shouting, it was about control. During a live combat drill, Harris made a tactical error, one that could have cost real lives in the field. Emma noticed it instantly. Without hesitation, she spoke up. "Sir, permission to adjust the formation," she said firmly. The colonel turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "Did I ask for your input, Lieutenant?" He barked. "Negative, sir," she replied, "but your left flank is exposed. If this were live combat." "Enough," he thundered, his voice cracking through the silence. Every soldier froze. The air grew thick. Harris took a step forward, his boots crunching against the dirt as he loomed over her. "You think you know better than me." His tone was low now, venomous. Emma didn't move. "No, sir," she said calmly, "I just know the difference between commanding and leading." A muscle twitched in his jaw. The surrounding soldiers glanced nervously at one another. Harris was known for humiliation, he made examples of anyone who dared challenge him. "On your knees," he roared suddenly, his voice echoing across the open field. Dust rose between them as the words hung in the air. Emma didn't move. She stood tall, her eyes locked on his, steady and unflinching. The tension around them was electric, the kind that made hearts pound and hands tremble. Harris took another step closer, his face inches from hers. "You heard me, Lieutenant," he hissed. "Get down." Her voice, when it came, was soft but sharp as steel. "Respect, sir," she said, "isn't something you demand. It's something you earn." The colonel's laughter came out like a growl. "You've got 5 seconds to obey before I make you regret that attitude." Around them, the other soldiers didn't dare breathe. They could sense what was coming, something was about to shatter. Emma's stance didn't change. Her eyes flicked to his shoulder, measuring the distance, the angle, the timing. 5 seconds. That was all she needed. And in those 5 seconds, the arrogant colonel would learn the hardest lesson of his career, that power means nothing when faced with true strength. Before the colonel could finish counting, Emma moved, fast, precise, and silent. Her hand shot up, catching his wrist mid-motion as he reached to grab her. With a quick pivot on her heel, she twisted his arm behind his back in one flawless motion. The sound of strained muscle and surprised breath filled the air. Colonel Harris stumbled forward, his balance ripped away from him, and within a heartbeat, his knee hit the dirt with a thud. A stunned silence fell over the entire training ground. The same soldiers who had once trembled under the colonel's voice now stood frozen, watching their commanding officer kneel before the very woman he had just tried to humiliate. Dust swirled around them, carried by the wind, while Emma stood above him, calm, steady, eyes sharp as a blade. Harris grunted, trying to twist free, but Emma applied just the right pressure on the nerve point in his shoulder. He gasped, his body reacting before his pride could. "You," he started, but she cut him off, her voice even and unshaken. 5 seconds, sir," she said quietly, leaning close enough for only him to hear. "You said I had 5 seconds. That's all it took." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay still. No one dared to move. The sight of the arrogant colonel on his knees was something none of them had ever imagined witnessing. For years, Harris had ruled through fear and anger, but in those 5 seconds, all that authority crumbled like dry earth. Emma released his arm and took a step back, keeping her posture disciplined and respectful, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. "Permission to continue the drill, sir," she said formally, her tone the very model of military decorum. For a moment, there was no sound except the rustle of the wind. The colonel remained on one knee, his head bowed, eyes fixed on the dirt below. His breathing was rough, his pride wounded deeper than his shoulder. Slowly, He stood, his face unreadable. The soldiers avoided his gaze, pretending to focus on anything else. Emma saluted him sharply, her movements crisp. "Orders, sir," she asked, maintaining the chain of command even when she had just proven herself stronger. Harris said nothing. His throat tightened with the weight of what had just occurred. For the first time in years, he realized how fragile power could be, how it could shift in a single heartbeat. Finally, he muttered, "Dismissed." The unit scattered quietly, but the whispers began immediately, whispers of the lieutenant who made the colonel kneel. Emma turned and walked away, not triumphant, not smug, but composed, as if the act was nothing more than duty. Because to her, it was. She hadn't fought him to prove she was stronger. She'd done it to remind everyone watching that real strength isn't shown through dominance, it's shown through control. When the sun began to set that evening, the training ground was empty, bathed in a soft orange glow. Colonel Harris stood alone near the same spot where his pride had fallen just hours earlier. The wind carried faint traces of the day's drills, the rhythm of discipline, the echo of respect, and for the first time, he felt silence instead of power. He had built his entire career on fear, on control, on being untouchable. But one moment, one soldier, had dismantled it all without a single insult, only skill, precision, and composure. He heard footsteps approaching and turned. It was Emma. Her uniform was dusty from the day's training, but her posture was as sharp as ever. She stopped a few feet away, saluted, and waited for him to speak. The colonel looked at her for a long time, searching for arrogance or triumph in her expression. There was none, only calm professionalism. "Where did you learn that move?" he finally asked, his tone no longer cold but curious, almost human. "Afghanistan, sir," she replied simply. "When you're surrounded, and you have seconds to react, you learn to move before you think." He nodded slowly. The memory of her voice earlier, calm under pressure, fearless before authority, echoed in his mind. "You could have embarrassed me in front of everyone," he said, his voice low. "But you didn't. You let me stand back up." Emma's eyes softened. "Because leadership isn't about making others kneel, sir. It's about helping them rise, even when they fall." For a moment, Harris said nothing. Then he gave a small, almost invisible smile. It wasn't defeat, it was recognition. The kind of respect that isn't forced but earned. "Lieutenant Ross," he said firmly, "from now on, you'll lead the advanced combat drills. I want the rest of the unit learning from you." "Yes, sir," she answered, saluting once again. But as she turned to leave, he added, "And Lieutenant, you taught me something today." She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "What's that, sir?" "That strength without respect is just noise," he said quietly. Emma nodded once and walked away, her silhouette fading into the golden horizon. The colonel stood watching, realizing that his command, once ruled by anger, now had a new kind of order, one built on humility and honor. From that day forward, the entire unit changed. The yelling stopped. The drills grew tougher but cleaner. Soldiers began following orders not out of fear, but because they trusted the person giving them. And whenever new recruits whispered about the story, the one where the arrogant colonel ordered a woman to her knees but ended up on his own, those who had witnessed it would smile and say, "That wasn't defeat. That was the day our leader finally learned how to lead."